Just a brief moment to make a comment before I start this video. I want to ask in advance for your patience with the fact that you're going to see a contrast in lighting from one section to the next. Maybe in the future I'll get my lighting together and it'll be very consistent. Right now, though, I'm still learning, and I decided to leave this in and let it be that way. But just ask for your patience, and hopefully you can focus on what I have to say and not so much what you're seeing behind me in terms of lighting. Thanks. Hello, Michael here. Welcome. Thanks for joining me today. Again, as I usually say, if you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel, and also check out the description below of my online store called Bazaar, and you'll find a link for getting there as well. And so I invite you to come and browse and see if you can find something that hits a spot. Maybe it's just what you need. Also, leave me a comment. If what I have to say makes you think some thoughts you'd like to share, please share them. If you have a question, if you have an idea for a topic I might cover in a future video, I'd love to hear about that. So think about that. So today's topic is about listening and responding deeply. Listening and responding deeply. As a therapist and a life coach, this is the bedrock. This is the foundation, the first step, the bread and butter of what I do. I have to listen, and I have to respond. That's the basics of what I do as a therapist. So I've worked at it for a long time, worked at it and thought about it a lot over a long period of time, and realized along the way that it's a lot more involved than I ever first imagined it might be. So what I want to do is describe how to listen and respond deeply. There's parts to it. There's probably more parts that I'm going to mention, but these seem to be the main parts to me. It's what I have come to try to pay attention to and to develop. So the first way we listen is with our ears. We actually, literally listen to the sound the other person is making. It's usually in the form of words, but it's not just the words. It's the tone in their voice. It's the volume. It's the silences in between things. It's all of the little sounds, like or little humming noises, or lip smacking, or groans. There's a lot to listen to. So we don't simply emit words. We make sounds. The words have a meaning in themselves, and we unpack that. But the sounds have a meaning. They suggest something. So the first way we listen is with our ears. And this means that we have to focus our attention. We have to block out peripheral sounds that aren't relevant to what the person is saying. So it doesn't stop there. That's the beginning. That's the beginning. Next, we listen with our eyes, which means that we look at the person when they're speaking, when they're communicating, whatever they're communicating, and we pick up nonverbal cues about what they're expressing that go together with their words for a more full impression of what they're wanting to say. How do they move? What's their physical posture and demeanor? What facial expressions are they making? Do they use their hands when they talk? And do we pay attention to that? Do we notice that? How does that enhance or embellish embellish what they're saying. There's things that, that I've noticed that people that I work with will do sometimes. They'll put their head in their hands. They'll hold their head. They'll do this. Various things that people do to touch their head that mean something. And so we listen by watching that as well. So we have our ears and our eyes that we listen with. And listening here doesn't just mean auditory sound. It means taking in everything that's presented. The mind. So we have to unpack the meaning of the words and make sense of and understand what the person's saying. It may not be that they're really clear. We may have to connect the dots as we're listening and surmise what it is they're trying to say, even if they're not able to say it. We see how one part of what they say is connected to another part, even if they haven't identified that. So we're thinking while we're listening. And the other way we listen with our mind is to notice what arises in our own mind. It's not just taking in the other person's words and making sense of them. It's noticing what they evoke in us. I know for me, a lot of times when I'm listening deeply, images come to my mind. I suddenly see a picture in my mind of something. And more often than not, it turns out to be some kind of metaphor. It's an encapsulation. It's a synthesis of what I'm hearing into a gestalt, a picture that represents what I'm hearing. Sometimes it's quite accurate, and I can share that, and I get a nod. Sometimes it's just a silly picture that doesn't add up. So the other thing we have to do as we're listening with our mind, we're listening to our mind and sorting out what's noise, what's our own personal associations, and what is really connected to what the person's saying. So that's listening with the mind. Next, we have our heart, and this is shorthand for feelings, right? It may center in the heart. Do we feel along with what the person's saying? Do we pick up through our ears and our eyes the emotional tone or content of what they're saying? And do we not just abstractly understand that that's how they feel, but do we resonate with it? Can we get a bit of a flavor of that in our own experience? Can we share that emotion with them while they're talking? We might listen as well, when we're listening to the other person, we're also listening to ourselves, paying attention to what arises in us. So we don't want to get distracted by our own emotional reaction or response to what the person's saying, but we can notice it. It's part of our listening, part of a full listening. So we notice, is this their emotion, or is this my reactive emotion? So we're noticing things from the level of heart. Next is the gut. We're going to go down a little deeper into our body, and we're all familiar with that gut feeling, right? We have gut feelings about things, and we have gut feelings about what somebody's saying to us. Does it feel true? Does it feel authentic? Is there something phony going on? Is there something maybe worse than phony? Is there something manipulative about, or dishonest about the person? Sometimes we can't figure it out. We don't see the clear evidence for it, but we get a feeling in our gut about what a person's saying. It might be about their authenticity, but it also might be that they're sharing something that's really painful, and it might hit us in our gut. You feel it in your gut. So we're listening there as well for whatever happens in that core part of our being as we're paying attention to the other person on many levels. Ears, eyes, mind, heart, okay, gut. We've got those. We've got one more way that we listen, with our whole body. What's happening in our own body as we listen to the other person? Do we feel on edge? Do we feel tense? Do we feel relaxed? Do we feel energized? Do we feel dull and lethargic? Do we have impulses that arise? Do we want to reach out, touch the person on the shoulder? Do we want to repel them? Do we have, what impulses do we have in our arms and our hands? They may be subtle, but if you pay attention, you'll begin to feel those impulses. Maybe there's impulses in your legs. You want to get up and run. These are things to pay attention to. There are ways of listening. Do your shoulders get scrunched up? Something that happens, I think it happens for all of us, but I notice it in therapy, it happens, is there's a mirroring that can happen where as I'm listening really closely, sometimes my body begins to go into the same subtle posture as the person I'm listening to. And I can notice that. As I just don't just notice that my body's in that shape, but what does it feel like to be in that shape in my own body? And there's somewhat of a connection to understanding what it feels like to be in the other person's body. It's not going to be precise, but we can get a flavor of it. So listening involves a lot. That's a hell of a lot of things to try to pay attention to. And kind of strain ourselves if we try too hard. I offer this as just things to check in on, just to kind of flash on, where is my body? What's happening in my mind? What does this tone of voice evoke in me emotionally when I hear it? All right, so that's half of it. If my job as a therapist and a coach was just about listening, that'd be that. But there's a reason to listen. It's not simply to hear and understand. It's to respond. Something is going to come back, or we could offer something back once we've heard. And we can go through these same areas when considering the variety of ways that we can respond. We respond by making sound, right? Through words, but it might be other things. I know I don't just communicate with words as a therapist, and I'm sure you don't just communicate through words. If somebody says something that's, sounds really painful, you don't just say, that sounds painful. You might, but you might go, ooh, 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 Or somebody says something saying, yeah. It's more the sound than the word, right? So we communicate with sound. In that sense, it's good to pay attention to our voice. How are we using our voice? Are we allowing it to express a variety of sound, tones, volumes, textures, or is it a monotone? I know even in making these videos, this is something I try to pay attention to. I'm not sure how well I do at it sometimes, because this is still new to me. I'm not talking to a real person. Well, you were there somewhere, but I'm not seeing you directly. So it's more difficult. How do we use our voice when we communicate? Not just the words we use. Eyes. So words and voice has to do with ears when you turn it into the response. Eyes. We communicate with our eyes. So there's two parts to the eyes issue here. One is, in fact, I had to redo this whole entire video. You know why? Because the first time I did it, I was looking at the wrong spot on my iPad. And so everything looked like I was looking off to the side. And so I had to do it all over again, because I want to communicate with you with my eyes. I want you to feel that I'm looking at you. And so that's how we communicate or respond. We can respond with our eyes by looking. And it's not just that we're focused where we're looking, but a feeling comes through our eyes. Our eyes are very expressive. It's kind of mysterious to me how many emotions get communicated through the eyes, because they're not big like the hands, right? Moving around a lot. They do subtle things, but we communicate. We respond with our eyes. The other thing, if we communicate with sound through our voice to the person's hearing, we respond to them so that they see us. They see our eyes, but they also see our whole body. So what are we communicating with our body? What do they see when we're responding? Do our words and our body go together? Are they the same message? Or are we saying one thing with our words and something else with our movements and our posture and our facial expressions? So to be aware that we're a visual display as well as an auditory display when we respond, and make use of that to communicate what we want to and want to give the person as a response. Let them see it also. So how do we respond with our mind? Well, we have to use our voice and we have to use our body, but what's happening on the level of mind? I think to respond deeply, we will want to convey our understanding and our desire to understand. What we won't be interested in is trying to impress the other person with our intelligence, our insights, our good advice, or our better arguments. At least in the beginning, it's to convey an understanding. Active or reflective listening is what some call this. One way to do it is to repeat back as closely as you can what you've heard, so that the person recognizes that you actually heard their real words. I think a better way to do it is to paraphrase it, or to rephrase it in one's own way. It shows that it's been digested a bit. It's not just being parroted back. I like to pepper that with some significant words that the person used that perhaps conveys their way of understanding themselves. And by peppering the response with some of those words, I think that confirms an understanding. And it's not just that we fully understand, but the other thing we're doing in responding with our mind is perhaps asking questions to gain more clarification or greater depth in how we've understood what the person has communicated to us. We might notice that some of the things they said didn't, in the way they presented it didn't seem connected, but maybe we wonder if there's a connection. We can share that. Something that happens for therapists is kind of a hazard of the field, I think, is that we're trained and we're educated with so many theories about the human psyche and about how things go wrong and how things can be made better, that we come in a bit overloaded with our own agenda, our own theoretical agenda. And rather than help us to listen more deeply and respond more deeply, it turns into a kind of a wedge. We lead too much with that. This is particular to therapists. It may be that it's not just therapists who do this, but as useful as our mental constructs and our knowledge about people and things can help us to understand what a person's saying, if we go to that too much, we might miss the person's own frame of reference. They have their own way of understanding themselves and how they want to be understood. And we could hold our theories lightly, hold them lightly, and perhaps offer our opinion on things when it seems to be a fit with where the person's at. It's some of the basic ways, I think, that we respond with our minds. We try to meet the other person's mind, where they're at, go from there. Heart. So we respond with our heart. Do we respond with a tone in our voice and a demeanor that shows that we understood the feeling in what they were saying, that we're resonating with it, that we're willing to share that as much as we can with them, the experience of it. That's part of our response, is our voice tone and everything. Our word choice as well. It's the actual sentiment or emotion that we convey. We might say, I feel sad about that. You actually say that, but you don't just say, I feel sad about that. It's obvious, right? So we respond with our heart. Doesn't always mean it's a sweet, wonderful feeling. It might be some other kind of feeling, depending on what we've heard, what we've really listened to. It might be, having fully listened, we wind up angry because the person is trying to pull the wool over our eyes somehow, and we don't like it. Okay, now we're getting down to the gut. We can respond with our gut, with our authentic feeling, not a phony, made-up feeling, disguise it in words and assumed tones. What do we feel in our gut? Are we responding authentically from our core as much as possible? Telling what feels true. What feels true. So we respond that way with our gut. And it may start with our gut. It starts with that gut feeling, but then that animates us. Just like it may start in our heart, but that's what animates us. And our whole body. So this is, it takes a long time, and it's never, I haven't mastered this. I think I've gotten better at it over time, and sometimes I'm better at parts of it than other parts of it. But I think it's useful to be able to think about all of these different dimensions of how we listen and how we respond deeply. Something that's sad to me is how rare this is, and that because it's so rare, there's such a great need for psychotherapy. If we were able to listen and respond deeply, if we were able to receive listening and response that was deep, powerful, maybe there wouldn't be a need for therapy or therapists. And that'd be fine. I'd figure out something else to do with my life. I think it'd be an entirely different world if this was actually happening a lot. If this was the default way that human beings operated, then we would be able to resolve all kinds of problems and not have them anymore. Be a better world. So if I can inch us just a tiny little bit closer to that kind of a world by offering this video, and maybe you think this makes sense, you'd like to aspire to it, or maybe you recognize areas that you're already pretty good at it and a few more ways that you could enhance that, that'd be great. That's what I wish for you. And this is my custom at the end of my videos, is to make a wish. It's my gratitude that you've listened to me this long and stuck with me. So I wish for you that you receive deep listening from somebody. You feel really heard, really seen on many levels. And then that makes a great difference for you, and that you find a way to offer that and feel your own satisfaction in that, that your relationships deepen and become stronger and more meaningful, more connected, simply by being able to listen and respond as fully as possible. Okay, I think I looked at the right part of the iPad today, so why don't I say so long and toodaloo.